What is going on, beautiful Bills fans? How you doing this evening? This Friday night edition of the Cover One Buffalo podcast. As always, I'm joined by the beautiful, full head of hair, Greg Thompson. How you doing, my man?
Doing well, man. It's we're doing a live show together at 7:00 on a Friday night, so obviously we are hip, happening dudes, and this is what we do.
Yeah, I have a ton of stuff that I do in my life that doesn't involve the Bills. No, that's not true. I don't do anything on Friday or Saturday nights except for go to bed early because my kids are going to be up anyway. So it's funny. I mentioned your hair. I was asking what should I do for the next Bills edit? And somebody's like, oh, edit yourself with a full head of hair. And I almost took a screenshot of you and just edited your hair on me just to shut him up. But
you've done more creative work. I could see it.
Yeah. So welcome, you guys. We're here. Sorry about this week. We do have lives outside of this, and we have some scheduling conflicts from time to time, but we try to keep it consistent. But here we are for you. And if you aren't already subscribed and click the little notification bell on YouTube, if you don't know when we're going live, that will notify you. It'll go to your phone or whatever you're on and let you know that we are going live. So make sure you do that while you're over here at YouTube. You make sure you got to click that bell or you won't get the notification. That's really the only way to know if we ever change something up or go live on the fly or a new video pops, which Eric is definitely going to be doing once this draft rolls around here. Now we're a couple weeks out. Once we get our draft picks, you're going to want to know when Eric drops these videos. I'm telling you, it'll really keep you up to date on who we picked and why they fit. So a couple other business notes here before we get into the show tonight. Jordan Reed, his draft guide is now available. It was available for pre-purchase. It is now available. Head over to cover1.net. Make sure you purchase that. I'm about halfway through. I got an early release because I helped him with the graphics. So as a thank you for that, he sent me it early before other people got it. And I'm only halfway through it because it's over 200 prospects and they are all full pages. So make sure you get your hands on it. It's a great read. I'm learning stuff about prospects that I haven't gotten a chance to even look at, or guys that maybe I got to look at and I didn't see it the same way Jordan did. So it's a great draft guide. We're 2 weeks out now, less than 2 weeks out from the draft. Make sure you get your hands on this because it's going to have you prepared. Anything else happening over here with us at Cover One, Greg?
No, I mean, obviously the draft guide has been a huge topic in the Cover One Slack channel, and it really kind of speaks to how we try to educate ourselves, how we try to go through. And obviously we're going to do a deeper dive once the draft comes, but now there's all kinds of guys that come up that, hey, I didn't realize that Andre Dillard was such a serious candidate for the pick here. Maybe I should dive back into him. Or, hey, I really hadn't spent much time looking at linebackers and really thought about it. And now I think they are a pretty key mid-round target. So being able to go through and really refresh myself on areas that I think are coming up, or is, we'll get into it in the show where we're hearing reports of visits or rumors coming up. I want to make sure I'm informed on those guys, and a draft guide like Jordan is just ideal to be able to do that. And the amount of work and effort that he puts into it is incredible. So certainly appreciate everything he did with that and everything it's allowed us to do.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was on Pat Moran's show and have been doing a regular thing on there. And he does the 4-round mocks. And I was telling him, I was like, dude, you got to get your hands on this draft guide, because the only reason he does the 4-round mocks is he starts to get lost with the amount of prospects that are there. Yeah, and I do too sometimes. I'm not going to lie. There's guys that are on the board and I say, wow, I wish I knew more about this guy. I said, get a hold of this guide and it'll fill you in. So he's going to go get a hold of it. And I think it's perfect for the people that are, want to do mocks, want to know more, especially I think everybody has a good idea about these top 10 to 15 prospects that might follow the Bills at 9. We all have a good idea there. It's once you start to get past that and further into the draft that anyone that follows the draft and does all their work doesn't know about all these guys. So the more information you get, the better. I would highly recommend Jordan's thing. So let's get into it, though. We'll talk a little bit more about Cover One and what we've got coming up for work as we go here through the evening. Let's get right into it. Last time we talked a little bit about Quentin Spain. We finally got the contract numbers. You love this stuff. You live in it. I think you have just printouts of spreadsheets that you just bathe in on the weekends. So tell me what you think about this deal and Brandon Beane and how he's structuring some of these contracts, and if there's any indicators behind these contracts.
It certainly was a huge shock to me. So I have a feeling that there are some similarities to Ty and Seki's deal, where the initial reported numbers, especially from the agent, were much different than what got submitted to the Players Association. When I say different, it doesn't mean it's fabricated, but players like that maybe didn't have the snap count last year or whatever it's there. The Players Association and the league have some structural elements where you describe escalators and bonuses players can earn either as likely to be earned or not likely to be earned. And they're pretty straightforward. If you've done it before, they mark it as likely to be earned. If you've never done it before or didn't in the past season, they mark it as not likely to be earned. Now, that doesn't matter. All that matters is the reality of whether you run for that many yards or start that many games or the team makes the playoffs or whatever it is. That's where it kicks in. But the big difference is whether it counts against the salary cap beforehand or after. So likely to be earned, the league is saying, hey, that's probably going to count against you and it's likely to happen. So we're going to count it now. If the player earns it during the year and it was not likely to be earned, it then kicks in after the fact. So every team has to plan as though that money's going to be earned because it could be, and you don't want it to kick you over the cap. So as the example, Ty and Seki's deal was reported as 2 years, $14 million, when in the initial count, because he didn't start that many games last year, it's really going to count closer to 4 or 5 million. I think it's 4.9. So he can earn up to 7.7. That's a pretty big range. So $2.8 million in, different games played and roster bonuses and things you can earn during the year is a big one. That's more than usual. So I have a feeling there's some of that out there from Quentin Spain that we didn't hear, because the numbers that show up in Spot Track that come off of the NFL Players Association is $2.05 million. They're paying Quentin Spain less than Vlad Dukas in the initial money. So he only had about a $400,000 to $500,000 signing bonus, which means he technically could be released without too much damage before the 53-man roster. All of his money is set to guarantee fully if he makes the 53-man roster. So it's surprising. I think you and I both saw him much closer to a mid-tier free agent than someone who now got paid without any bonuses or escalators, a pretty significant chunk less than John Feliciano and Spencer Long. So that was surprising. So I know you made a comment that I thought made a lot of sense. It's probably a combination of his agent misplayed it a little bit, and they probably misplayed their market. They allowed Roger Saffold to sign in Tennessee and to lose that backup plan. It's also probably timing and being, negotiating a pretty slick deal again, and maybe a different value amongst front offices than versus what fans had, where all of us saw him more as an immediate starter and a guy that was going to come right in and take it. And I'm going to say this contract probably tells me he's more of competing for a spot, but maybe on more even footing with Feliciano and Long than what we assumed.
Yeah, I do. I think it is an indicator that even myself, who got really excited about it, maybe have to pump the brakes a little bit on what this guy is and what he's going to contribute to this team. And maybe he will be a starter, but I don't know that he's going to come and blow the doors off this team. And this is an area that, just like salary cap, that you could talk about all day. This is an area for me that I could talk about all day. And the PFF grades, I think that they're super deceiving. And when you look at Quentin Spain's PFF grades, he should be getting paid with the top guards in the league, and he should have been a guy that was highly sought after in that first round of free agencies based on those grades, because when everybody Googled him, when there was known interest, I started seeing all the PFF tweets about how in the playoffs he was one of the highest rated guards, and throughout the year he's one of the highest rated pass protection guards, and all those things. Those are misleading stats, and I don't think teams take those into consideration at all. They turn on the tape, and Eric showed us there's good tape. He's got the meanness that they like, but it's not all good. And clearly, I think that his contract and lack of interest from around the league and going so late in free agency kind of shows that there's still some question marks about him. I think he could be a solid contributor, but I think maybe he's not the guy that we immediately thought that he was going to be. And I'll qualify that with I don't think anybody they brought in on the line really moves the needle outside of we've gotten now from the worst line. I'll keep saying it. We've gotten from the worst line to a really average line across the board. And that is a huge thing. We talked about it before free agency started. We didn't know how they were going to be able to fix this offensive line. I think they did more than you and I even thought was going to be possible.
Yeah, no, it certainly was way more from a quantity standpoint. Anybody who said they thought we were signing 6 free agent offensive linemen, you're a liar. No, you didn't. Yeah. So I just don't see that as an indication of like you said, that we've all of a sudden solved it and we're good now going forward. We probably only added one, I'm going to say 2, one definitive long-term starter. And then my guess is out of Inseki, Leadrin Waddle, John Feliciano, Spencer Long, Quentin Spain, that one of them is also a long-term piece. We just don't know which one. We'll kind of discover it during the season, and then they'll probably get re-signed. And then maybe another one, maybe a couple of them finish out the second-year deal. Long, Feliciano and Inseki both signed 2-year deal, or all 3 of them signed 2-year deals. So I'm guessing we do get another long-term piece out of those 4 or 5 guys, but the other 2 or 3 probably are just going to be here for this year or next year, ride out their contract, and then move along as quality depth. And we'll continue to look for longer-term pieces in the draft or another high-end splurge like a Mitch Morris maybe next year.
Yeah, and I think that's totally fair. There's the cap room is there next year. You have the cap room this year to be able to kind of play around with that, hoping a guy fits. And if you get 2 out of 5 or whatever it is, that's fine with me. I think that's good numbers in the NFL to get 2 guys that are going to be part of your plan moving forward. So I'm all for that. And to Quentin Spain's contract, I think he's, for his cap hit this year, I saw he was like 56th in the league. Yeah, I think he's going to play above 56. So I think the value is more than there. I'm not trying to say that he's equal to the value of his contract. I think the Bills worked a little magic and got a good contract, but I don't think that he's like, we got the 10th best guard in the league for the 56th price. I don't think we got that type of crazy deal. I think they got a pretty fair deal in a late part of the market.
Yeah. And I'd say, again, you and I are always very careful about taking PFF grades with a grain of salt. I think a lot of the ones I saw when you took both rush and running and pass blocking into account for the whole season, I think I saw him rank 35th. Sure. Which means he's middle of the road among starters, or was last year. And I think that's a reasonable expectation. If we end up getting the 35th rated guard on a $2 million deal, that's a huge win and a great value. So if that's what we got, great. If he comes in and is better than that, that's amazing. If he's less, just like that, we've gotten into it, and I certainly have with a lot of guys on Twitter, who are trying to chip away at the quality versus quantity of Brandon Beane's free agent class. The biggest thing is not the assumption that we're going to need to get out of every single contract. We're not. The reason that Beane signs them that way is he's aware that out of 17 free agents, all of them aren't going to work out, and there's going to be a couple that we might need to get out of. And when you structure them that way, if we're really lucky and it's only 2 or 3 or 4 that we need to get out of, then that's great. You can get out of them without much pain or too much difficulty. And that, yes, there's downside. If there's a great problem to have if those players ball out and just do amazing. And then we have to worry about, oh man, I wish we had to lock them up for a longer term deal. Well, sure, that would have been cool, but that's why you structure them that way. You give yourself the team control. You give yourself the opportunity to do that. And if that guy earns another contract, that's great. And then we try to sign him again at a market deal.
Yeah, I mean, we suffered through some severe dead cap, some of the worst I've ever seen.
Some of them literally set league records.
Yeah, but let's not be fooling ourselves that moving forward after this year, that there's going to be more of that dead cap is going to compile throughout the years. There's going to be contracts that you just, we got to get out of this. This didn't work out for us. We need the roster spot. We're just going to eat this cap and move along. And there is a healthy amount of dead cap that I think, because of last year, there's this indication that dead cap is some bad thing. It's there because it's another tool in the pocket for a GM to be able to move money around and not totally eat it all right away. And you just kind of store that dead cap. So there's some healthy amount of dead cap, I think.
I was just going to say the same thing. Yeah, I think teams or fans who aren't familiar or aren't giant financial nerds like I am, that don't pay attention to it, assume that really good teams have zero dead cap, and that's not the case. The Patriots, the Rams, the Chargers, the Saints, last year, maybe they had between 4 and 8 and 10 million rather than 55 million that the Bills had. But I would say somewhere between single digits million dead cap is very standard and very normal, because everybody has to make releases, or heck, just making a good trade. You might get really good trade compensation, but but to get out of that contract and trade the player away, you eat dead cap. So, I mean, it's just a necessary evil within the league. And I think Bean is going to operate that way, not the crazy $55 million that we had to take that medicine and lose. Again, I did the analysis. Those first 11 or 12 free agents we signed literally fit into that dead cap space that we signed. Now we're well beyond that as we have 17 guys. But that's the kind of depth that we were allowed to add because of that kind of move.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I'm happy with this deal. What is our cap number sitting at here heading into the draft? And what do we need available for draft picks? We're probably not taking 10 back, but just a kind of a rough estimation of what.
Yeah, I won't go too far down the rabbit hole. We haven't officially, we'll get into one more signing that we've made that I assume is going to be close to a minimum deal. And so there's a calculation called the top 51 calculation, where right now we have 71 guys under contract. They only count the top 51 against you, assuming that that's roughly how it's going to fit in. When we add in the draft picks, some of them are cheap. Obviously, the top handful of picks, the guys who are going to be picked first, second, third, even fourth round, start to count a little bit more than the minimum. Everybody else is down below there. So say we use all 10 draft picks, it would probably add about an extra $4 million roughly in actual used cap space. So right now with our top 51 contracts, we have 31 million in space. Let's say about 4 million of that is in the draft picks to swap out the bottom 10 guys. If we did swap out all 10, which again, I don't think either you or I expect that. That gets us closer to say 27 million. I know that Brandon Bean says he always likes to keep 10 million in pocket to be able to operate during the year. So I would say from an actual usable cap space standpoint, I know some fans still want to see us go after a Ziggy Ansah, or I know Ron is in the chat, and I think every day he reminds me that we should trade for Jadeveon Clowney. If we were going to do a move like that, I think Bean has roughly 17 million in usable cap that he could play with right now.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So keep that in mind, guys, as we head into that. We did have one other signing, a guy that I really didn't even know anything about. Did you know anything about this signing, man?
So the bringing on Eli Harold.
Eli Harold.
So I joke the same.
I'm not going to pretend like I knew who he was until 24 hours ago.
Yeah, the comment I made about Ty and Secchi, I joked about that I wasn't sure he existed as a human prior to the signing. Once I went back and looked at it, I did remember him as an outside linebacker coming out who went to the 49ers and then got traded to the Lions. I've heard his name before. He's kind of that classic tweener that isn't quite big enough to be an every down D end, maybe isn't quite fast enough to be just an off-ball linebacker. But his ratios and like pressure percentage wasn't terrible in the times that he pass rushed. I would say he's pretty much on par with with some of our depth, like an Eddie Yarborough or maybe above a Mike Love, like that kind of guy. So if we don't sign Ziggy Ansah, we don't trade for Clowney or Frank Clark or whoever, which I don't expect, and we don't hit a premium level draft pick at defensive end, I think he's got a shot to beat out Yarborough as defensive end 4. Beyond that, I think he's probably a camp body here to compete, and maybe he's a pleasant surprise and just blows him away and makes the team. But I would say he's probably right there on the edge of that 53rd guy right now in that Duke Williams, Deion Lacey, Jake Fisher territory.
Yeah, I think he is exactly that. So I didn't know anything about him, so I fired up Game Pass. Had trouble even finding him in Game Pass, to be honest. And I think he's just is going to be that guy that competes with the Eddie Yarboroughs of the world. And there'll be some really cool competition. And that might be one of those ones that gets talked about in the summer. But outside of that, I think if he makes the roster, it's going to be in the bottom 10 part of the roster. And he better contribute on special teams or he's out of here.
Yeah, and he did. We even got a little bit of input from Russell Brown, our neighborhood Lions fan, who's also the great draft analyst for Cover One. And he said the same thing, that he is deserving of being on an NFL roster and is probably going to catch on with someone else if the Bills don't keep him. He did contribute, maybe I think it was like 100 and some snaps on special teams for the Lions on top of the pass rush snaps. So I think there's some value there if he does make it. But again, I think he's probably less than 50-50.
Yeah, especially when your boy Montez Sweat ends up here at 9, then he's definitely
clearly is obviously a pick.
So let's get into that a little bit. I don't want to spend too much time here on random free agents we're bringing in here. There's a lot of talk buzzing about visits, draft visits, the big 30 visits that we get. You get 30 visits that count at your facility. This is outside of, obviously, we talk about all the time, who have the Bills talked to? And a lot of it we really don't know, because there's conversations that we're just not going to know about because they happened at the combine in passing and nobody documented it. Obviously, the Bills have not really given out a lot of leaks themselves. I think a lot of the information that comes out either comes from players, people seeing players on Instagram tagging themselves at the Bills facilities, agents releasing information, other teams releasing information. It's not coming from Buffalo. So we don't know the whole picture of who they have and haven't talked to. So when you see these visits and stuff, just know that these ones that they're at the stadium, they only get the 30 visits outside of territorial visits. So Penn State, for instance, it falls within the Bills territory. So anyone they had from Penn State doesn't count against the 30. Obviously, Tyree Jackson was in the facility today. That does not count against their 30 visits. So these 30 visits, though, are the ones that we're going to know about. We don't know about all the interviews at the Senior Bowl and Combine and all that throughout that. And just because we haven't heard a guy been interviewed doesn't mean that he hasn't been talked to by the Bills, or that there isn't a connection that's strong enough where they said, you know what, we don't have to waste the draft resources. We know the coaches at this school. We know all about this player. We have enough tape. We feel comfortable. We're going to use our resources somewhere else. You want to elaborate on that process a little bit, what you kind of know of these meetings and what to look into and what to look for?
Yeah, I think that we're getting better at it. And honestly, some of it is some kind of creepy Instagram stalking. But that's where a lot of it comes from now. Like you said, agents, different reporters come bringing things out that now we can cobble together most of the visits. There's a tiered structure to it. So going out to games and being on campus there does not count against anything during the season or after the season. If you fly out to their facility and go through and do that and work them out, or stay after at a pro day, and the Bills go to almost every major pro day, those don't count and don't get reported.
But in in-season ones, they can't talk to the players.
Correct. You're right. Correct. That's just coaches and
anyone on the staff
around them.
Yeah.
Yes, correct. And I think I'm
sure there is some conversation.
It's naive to think it never happens, but I would say McDermott and Bean strike me as guys who probably try to keep it on the up and up more than average. So I won't say never, but I'm going to guess that they keep it within the rules more than the average front office. So you have those. Then you have the Senior Bowl where they're there. We had our coaches there. We had Bobby Johnson running some line drills. We had our, DB coaches out there running stuff. Or the example, I know Bobby Johnson ran some of the drills at Andre Dillard's pro day, and our DB coach ran the drills for Rock Ya-Sin at the Temple pro day. Those don't count as official visits, but obviously they're very involved in those. You go to the Combine and they get 15-minute interviews with everybody. A lot of those get reported, but we don't hear all the numbers. Those don't count as official visits. The interaction at the Senior Bowl. So there's a lot of guys that I know they joke before, the cleaner the prospect, the less need there is for an interview. Usually the official visits are medical things, red flags that came up on the background check, things you want to vet out, or honestly, it's naive to think it doesn't happen, but just straight smoke screens that, hey, look, we're bringing in quarterbacks. You better watch out for us. Some of that stuff is in there. So the combination of misinformation is hard, but I will say the early round picks for the Bills and for the history of Brandon Beane and McDermott and their past, and Joe Shane and their past guys, their past, lives and jobs, there is an indicator. So that's what I say in the premium channel Slack a lot is official visits and documented interaction is an indicator, not a qualifier. So it's information. It's likely that after the draft, after the first and second day, the first 2 or 3 picks we make, it's very likely they came from the visits that we did. But it's also possible that we might pick a guy that we didn't do a visit with because we had good interaction at the Senior Bowl and at his pro day and didn't need to do an official visit. So Trey
White is a great example. When they traded back, he was not an official visit with the Bills. They did see him at the Senior Bowl. And I think the connection with McDermott and LSU, he felt comfortable to say, you know what, I know enough about this guy where I feel good investing this type of capital in him in the draft. I don't care if we visited with him or not. Another thing that, and we'll talk about this a lot more next week. I won't be on the show, but Eric's going to be here with Nate Geary, I believe you guys have. And we're going to talk a little bit more about archetypes, which Eric does a great job. And people often wonder how he knows so well fits for the Bills. And basically he's got one of those conspiracy boards, I think, in his room that you see on TV.
Connected yarn.
Yeah, he's buying up a ton of yarn from Joanne Fabric and connecting all these dots. But it is taking these visits, taking the historical drafts of all the front office guys and the fits for the defense and the measurables and all these statistics and putting together kind of common denominators and drawing lines. So you look at the visits and then you say, okay, well, out of those visits, which visits are fits to the scheme, which visits are fits to the archetypes. And we're going to get more into that next week to try to really hone down on who the Bills are probably looking at the most per round in each round and where we should be looking. But so I think, like you said, they are an indicator, but they are an indicator like a lot of like stats are for film, where it's an indicator to tell you to go back and look at something. So when you see a name that you haven't seen before, like Hamp Cheevers or some of these cornerbacks that are coming in, you haven't seen this name before, and you're like, wow, why are we having him come in? Let me go back, look at his stats, look at his measurables, look at the tape, see if there's really a fit here or if we're just filling out the list. So if you want, real quick, we can go over the list because there are some interesting names on here. Probably a lot of names that people assume, especially at the top of the draft. But I'll go through it in order of position. Let's start with the tackles because that's one that I think is going to be a target, and they've shown that here throughout their meetings. Titus Howard, Nate Davis, who's an interior offensive line, Jawan Taylor, Greg Little, all official visits. And then you have our boy from one of our mock drafts, Elton Jenkins, another offensive lineman, all have come in for an official visit with the Bills. In that group, what do you think's going on there? There's no Jonah. Do you think they just got enough on Jonah there and no Dillard?
Yeah. So, and I think those are perfect examples of if you go out and Bobby Johnson runs the line drills at the Washington State Pro Day and literally is the main guy working him out, and our offensive coordinator came from Alabama, you probably don't need a visit.
And they probably took him out to dinner that night.
Oh, yeah. And that's the exact kind of thing we're talking about here. So, and I know I give some of our brethren on Twitter a hard time. There's a few groups that I think are a little too rigid in the visits, and they'll do their mock drafts purely and only from guys that have official visits. And that's probably limiting yourself from who are the actual available candidates. But I think let's say we do take 10 draft picks. I think it's very likely that 4 or 5 of them will come off the list of guys that we had visits with, but it's probably less than half. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's not going to be a huge hit rate on guys, I think, that had visits, but there are definitely guys that we know that they should be interested in. And I think you see a lot of it. Obviously, Greg Little on the offensive line surprises me a little bit, but maybe NFL scouts are bigger on him than the internet scouts are, because I haven't heard a single good thing said about this guy in the entire draft season, which is crazy.
Well, I'm going to say let's consider him versus a Titus Howard. So I love the idea of Titus Howard. He's got a ton of physical capability, but is raw and a project, and everyone loved him. And he was a 4th or 5th round pick at one point, and now is working up to a 3rd. And now I've heard maybe 2nd or even late 1st, versus Greg Little, who going into the season was a top 5 overall pick, the rock solid number 1 tackle, maybe the number 1 overall pick, and now has fallen. And now I've heard mid-2nd, even the 3rd round. Well, in reality, is there difference in picking a guy from Alabama State that we think needs to mentor behind Ty and Secchi for a little while versus a guy who played in the SEC and hits every physical archetype? And that, no, I don't want Greg Little at pick 9, but if we get into the pick 40, maybe, and if we get, he's somehow on the board of pick 74, I would be much more open to that. The same thing I talk a lot about. I'm not a huge fan of DK Metcalf. Well, I'm not a huge fan of DK Metcalf as a top 10 pick. I think he's an awesome prospect. I think he's very exciting. If DK Metcalf was on the board at pick 40, I'd do a cartwheel. Yeah. That would be fantastic. So I think that everyone has value at a spot. And I think bringing in Greg Little is just doing your homework on a guy that Bean hears is, has had some rough visits and, hey, what's going on here? If he's on the board, we need to be prepared what we're going to do if we have the option of taking him.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And to talk about this unit before we move on, and I'll move on to wide receivers next since you brought up Metcalf, that unit and not having Jonah there too. Obviously, we didn't run his pro day, but you have Brian Dable, and he knows Jonah enough
and knows all the people in Alabama.
Yes, absolutely. Can make a few phone calls and just say, hey, if McDermott needed somebody to talk to. But I think they trust Dable enough where if Dable was like, hey, I need Jonah. Like if he's there at 9, he's my guy and I really want him and I'll pound the table for him. They're going to say, you know what, we trust you enough to that he's a fit for you. So we'll get him. So I'm not worried about those names not being on this list. So that is just one of the things that you'll see as this list goes on. Let's move on. We'll come back to running back. Let's move on to wide receiver because it's a huge need and there's only 4 guys that got brought in. And that's a little surprising to me because I thought that maybe we'd see more because there's so many of these guys in the mid rounds that I think I would have thought we would see more of that coming in, but all we had was really some top end guys in DK Metcalf, AJ Brown, Khalil Harry, and then the kid from Penn State, DeAndre Tompkins, which again doesn't count against the visit. So the guys that don't count against the visits, that one's hard because they can just bring them in and it really doesn't matter. They're just bringing in an extra guy. So DK Metcalf's got stirred up a lot of stuff because he was wearing something Buffalo Bills on his Instagram.
Workout shirt.
He did, but Ellen Jenkins had a Bills hat on, and that didn't make me think they told him, we're picking you if you're there. So I don't know if I buy into anything. The Bills colors are cool. I wear them every day. So
yeah, if you think these guys aren't walking away with a huge bag of swag at every visit they go to, you're kidding yourself.
Yeah, no. I will. If they want to get rid of it after the draft process, I'll give them my address. They can donate all that dope Bills swag. So, but that's those are 3 guys that have been linked to the Bills. Obviously, every wide receiver has been linked to the Bills. What do you think about this wide receiver group that has been brought in for official visits?
I think that it does speak to where the one remaining gap is in our wide receiver room, and that's a big, prototypical size, catch radius, high point skill set guy. So whether that's one of those guys available at pick 40, which I think is certainly in play, if you see a N'Keal Harry or an AJ Brown, or obviously I love Hakeem Butler. I've heard there's some people like Kelvin Harmon. There's some guys there that could be a fit. I don't see any scenario where DK Metcalf's there at 40, but you never know. They want to do their homework and be prepared. That is the one connection that I see there is I think that that's the kind of guy they're looking for. I also think it's challenging that we've talked about it before. I can literally rattle off 15 receivers that I would be pretty happy if they brought in. I think that they just see the depth of this class and that they can probably get somebody in the 4th round or so. And it's really going to be play it by ear. Let's see who's still there. And it's probably hard to guess at, should it be Mecole Hardman or Andy Isabella or Miles Boykin, or again, 12 other names I could rattle off. It's probably hard to guess that and to do a bunch of homework because it's really hard to know who's going to be there. So I would guess part of that is not going through the motions on something that would probably be relatively fruitless.
Do you think it's surprising that we didn't see Butler there with the type of guys that we did see and not having any other real connection to Butler that we've heard of yet?
I would be a hypocrite if I said that there wasn't any indication there. It is, though, that list is an indicator. I didn't hear anything of them being at the Iowa State workout individually. I didn't hear anything reported of things at the combine. He's an underclassman, so he didn't go to the Senior Bowl. I don't know for sure, but
sure. It could even be something as simple as, we don't think he's going to be there where we are going to end up, or if our trade back, so we're just not going to waste the time there. Could be something as simple as that, or they just have enough tape on him and feel good about him.
Or in all honesty, or that he's not a target and they have him lower on the list or off the board for something else.
Sure. It could just be they didn't like it and said, you know what, this isn't our guy. Tight end, obviously we want to walk away with one. Only 2 guys come in at the tight end position. Jay Sternberger and Trevon Wesco. Obviously, I think they probably have enough on the Iowa guys. I don't think that if they have an opportunity to take them and feel comfortable with the positioning, I don't know that that's at 9. I really don't think it is. But if they were in a trade back scenario, I don't think it would prevent them from taking one of those guys. But I think this is an indicator of what they think of this tight end class and where they think they'll be able to get one.
Yeah, that one is a little odd to me, but I think similar to what I said for receiver, and like you just touched on, the depth is I think after the top three, there's like 12 guys that I could see them taking, and it's hard to know which one's going to be there. I think most people have Sternberger number 4, but then I can read, Foster Moreau and Wesco and Cahill Waring, and there's a ton of and Caden Smith and Caleb Wilson and Josh Oliver, and there's just so many guys that I think are all basically the same upside but low probability that they're going to turn out, but maybe they will. I think that there's that. I think it's a little weird that there's no official contact because Hawkinson, Irv Smith, and Noah Fant, none of them were seniors, so none were at the Senior Bowl. No official visits, although I guess we touched on that with Jonah and how they'd have info on Irv Smith. I would like it better if they had done more official contacts there because I want one of those top 3 guys, but
Sure.
Like you said, that doesn't mean that they're not interested or that they haven't made contact in other ways.
Yeah, no, and again, Dable has enough probably on Irv Smith in Alabama, so I kind of write that one off. That if there was interest, they don't need to bring him in. The Iowa guys, I think there's probably enough tape and consensus on those guys, so I'm not sure that you have to bring either of those top 3 guys in. I would have expected more of the middle range of tight end, but I do think it's an indicator that us Bills fans might have a hard pill to swallow, that I think they like Croft a lot more than the fan base does in that signing of him, that they like that. And I think they're comfortable with him going in to week 1 as the starting tight end. And then one of these guys as a project so they don't have to reach for that position.
I agree.
But another huge one, I think, outside of offensive tackle is that really these defensive line and offensive tackle, I think, are the targets. Absolutely. At 9, the closer we get here. And they had a number of guys in, and we'll just read them off, not in any particular order or position, but we have Rashawn Gary, Jalen Ferguson, your boy Montez Sweat, Rob Quinn's boy, Brian Burns, which I thought was odd they had him in, Max Crosby, who we know Eric loves, Quentin Williams, who everybody universally crushes over, Ed Oliver, who's a fan favorite in Buffalo and seen as a high target, Kalen Saunders, a guy that I'm constantly taking in mock drafts, Josh Allen, who is shocking a little bit to me because I haven't seen really him and Quentin. I haven't seen any indication that there's a chance that they fall there, but doing some due diligence, that's a pretty substantial list of defensive ends. And then Sharif Miller, another Penn State guy, does not count.
Yeah, I know you and I have debated back and forth on both of us are very comfortable with defensive line or offensive line. I think you lean a little bit more towards the offensive tackle. If all of them were on the board, I lean a little bit more on the defensive line, but there's so many studs there that I just want a large human. I don't particularly care which one it is. So I know some guys in the chat asked, I think it was Eric, why I'm such a big fan of Montez Sweat. And I like some of the measurements, the combination of production, athletic testing. He just checks every box. And I think there's such a low risk that he is an overall bust. I like that. But there's a lot of guys that I trust. Like you said, Rob Quinn and Joe Marino and guys like that who are huge fans of Brian Burns. I respect guys like that, and that I'm very open to that. So he wouldn't be my top choice, but if the Bills take him, I'm fully on board. I would obviously love a guy like Quentin Williams or Josh Allen. I don't expect that to be the case, but that'd be great. I don't like the idea of Rashawn Gary. I think Chase Winovich is the best pass rusher on Michigan's team, and I'd rather get him at pick 40 than Rashawn Gary. Heck, I'd rather him at pick 40 than Rashawn Gary at pick 40. But I get it. He, like you talked earlier about archetypes, and Rashawn Gary checks a lot of those boxes from a size and measurement standpoint. I don't care for his makeup from whether he loves football, and his production was always kind of weird. But they did bring him in for a visit. They wanted to do their homework. So I do think that defensive line is going to be a key. I know you and your pod, which you did an awesome job with Pat Moran going through there, you guys realize how much depth there is in this defensive line class. I want to be careful with that. I think it's also has some premier talent. So I like the idea that if we miss and go Andre Dillard, Juwan Taylor, Jonah Williams, we're still in great shape that we could get Jerry Tillery or Chase Winovich or later on Max Crosby or Kalen Saunders or Renell Wren or anyone like that. Those are still nice players. They're not Ed Oliver. They're not Montez Sweat. I'd still love to get an impactful guy there at 9, but it is nice that if we don't, there's still good depth afterwards. So I love that there's so many visits on the D-line.
Yeah, and that's really my thing. And I agree with you. You want impact players, but if you had to flip a coin, you're only going to get one of these impact players in that top 10. but you could maybe get the next tier down. But the next tier down on defensive line is a little bit less of a blow and still a day one contributor that you can bring in. And I trust the coaching staff, and more so on the defensive side of the ball, to find the fits that are going to be kind of the diamonds in the rough. And that's where I like the depth of the defensive line with this team, with a better unit than the offense has, to plug in a guy in the second, third, and fourth round that can come in and be a day one contributor. We've seen it on the defensive side of the ball with these mid-round picks hitting really well. So also adding the depth to that position really intrigues me. But I'm the same way. I'm going to be happy with any of those top guys. Even Rashawn Gary, I'd probably talk myself into. I feel like he's one of these guys that maybe less so than a Josh Allen, but a coach sees their just physical traits and the flashes of the ability and says, you know what, I can get the most out of this guy. There's a coach.
Edmonds.
Yes, there's
very similar to Tremaine Edmonds.
Exactly. Multiple coaches in this league that are watching him and saying, they didn't do him service in Michigan, and I can get the most out of this guy. And he's got all the traits I need. I just need to coach him up. And there's guys that think that they can do that, and maybe somebody can, but I agree with you. It's not my first choice. Let's move over. A question I'm getting asked a ton is, why aren't the Bills bringing in and talking about more linebackers? And my answer is the class and the free agency was just a weird fit for what the Bills need in replacing. They really only need something to back up Lorenzo Alexander after this year.
Yeah.
And that guy is not like just right there at the top of free agency or the draft this year for them. So they did bring in some guys though. Vosen Joseph is the only linebacker I think they brought in, and they've looked at guys, but I don't think that that's a target this year. I think they'll address that in the future.
Yeah, not from a top end standpoint. I would say it's very similar to running back. It's a position that we can take a swing on in the mid rounds to prepare for the future. But guys have to realize this is the modern NFL. We have two linebackers or less on the field 60 to 70% of the time. So it's just not that big of a need when you have Tremaine Edmonds, who is still only 20 years old right now. So is going to be younger than almost every linebacker drafted this year, let alone, from his rookie year. Matt Milano, Milano is coming back from a very serious injury. We do need to take that into account. Lorenzo Alexander has announced that this is his last year of playing. So I think we can take a swing in the mid rounds on a guy to be able to contribute, but it's just not a primary need. I know people were talking about going after, one of the top, Quan Alexander or Mobley or something like that. That's crazy. You're not going to pay a guy that's going to come in and play 30% of snaps, or pay a guy a ton of money to make Milano or Edmonds only play 30% of snaps. That's just not how you build a roster. It's like going out and signing another quarterback or something like that. It's just poor asset allocation. So I'm fine. And again, I brought it up at the beginning of the show. I now have come around to the idea, especially with how many guys we signed at cornerback, the combination of Johnson and Gaines and Wallace all competing for cornerback too. I actually think the mid rounds at linebacker makes sense to maybe see one there in the third or fourth or fifth round to come in and kind of groom underneath Lorenzo Alexander. But I don't expect a high end investment.
No, and really, even at the end of the day, even if they don't hit on anyone in this draft, every team, including the top teams in the league, are going to have holes of depth or things like that. We're not looking to have a field a perfect roster in 2019, if ever. So you're going to have some pieces that you're going into the season saying, man, I wish we had something a little bit better behind this guy or that guy. So that's going to happen. And I just think most of it was a matter of fit and guys available, both in free agency and this draft. There just isn't a lot of it. We'll move over to cornerback, a thing I think you should take at least one every draft, even if you're stacked. You can't have enough of these guys, and especially if you get them late and you can stash them. Sean Budding came in, Joanne Williams, Hamp Cheevers, like I mentioned earlier, Amani, I'm not even going to butcher his last name, the kid from Penn State.
Yeah.
And then two safeties in Juan Thornhill and Chauncey Gardner-Johnson. Now, Gardner-Johnson is an interesting one for me because that kind of just came out of nowhere, and he's a guy that I've been seeing kind of mid-late first round coming off the board, like really the first safety coming off the board. Why are we bringing him in? What's the deal there?
So right now we are stacked in the secondary. We have 10 NFL caliber guys in the secondary, which means we're going to have an NFL caliber guy probably not make this roster because I think that we're probably going to go 9 in the secondary on the 53 man, some combination of 4 corners and 5 safeties, or 5 corners and 4 safeties. But that doesn't mean that you don't invest in a talented guy if they fall down the roster. If we end up cutting, or, probably not a trade, but Brandon Beane traded Marshall Newhouse, so anything's possible. If we needed to trade Marlowe or Seren Neal or, one of the cornerbacks, you can still do that. So I think they're just preparing and covering their bases. Raphael Bush only has one more year on his deal. They may want to prepare in case they can't re-sign Poyer or Hyde down the line. I don't think that Seren Neal has locked himself onto the roster. Obviously, Dean Marlowe didn't make the opening 53 last year, so he's no lock for things. So I would be really surprised if we saw a safety or a corner, or a safety at pick 40. I would personally be surprised with a corner at pick 40, but they've done enough workouts with Rock Ya-Sin and Amani and Amari and some of those guys that would definitely be in that range, that I think we need to be open to the fact that they could take a guy there. But it's, it's something that I would rather see the pick somewhere else. I'd love to see them open defensive end, offensive tackle, tight end, wide receiver, defensive tackle. I'd love to see them open up that kind of position set up, and then get your linebackers, your corners with later picks that aren't guarantees to make the roster. But they did this free agency wave to give them the opportunity to go best player available, and that means you need to be open to anything.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's some guys on that list that on the not on the visit list that are going to be targets somewhere in the draft. I think it's a mid-round thing, and I do think they bring in some more pieces in that secondary, and I'm totally fine with that. Two other guys that they brought in, obviously something we talk about that they have to walk away from the draft with, running backs. We had Darrell Henderson, who's a guy, super productive running back in college, and then also Miles Sanders, who's people like as a sneaky good running back here that sat behind Saquon Barkley and then finally did some production last year. Not really much to say there. I think that's par for the course. I take either of those guys in the mid rounds if they're there, and there's probably 10 other guys that we talk about all the time and on mock drafts that I'd also take. So those are just guys they're probably going to be there and maybe available, and they'll probably be there when we mock here in a minute.
Yeah, no, I agree. I like both of those running backs, and they're two of the 10 guys that I like.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's get into, before we get into our mock, and obviously we're going to run a little bit late here tonight, guys. So I hope that you're up for a fun evening and Friday, because we haven't even started our mock yet. Want to touch on two rumors. This is now, obviously it's lying season, but there are some rumors that come out, and there's some really good guys that just have a good track record of things they hear around the league, and they're going to start putting those things out, and we'll talk about them when they put them out. So obviously Ben Albright, a guy who nailed the Nathan Peterman pick a couple years ago, who nailed the Josh Allen. He was really the first to report the Bills' super interest in Josh Allen and even trading up for it. He was asked on Twitter what he thought the Bills wanted, and he said something to them, paraphrasing him now, that the Bills hope Oliver falls to them at 9. Not a huge surprise. I think that everybody agrees that is something that is there in those top 3 guys. And then Daniel Jeremiah, and then also Tony Pauline, who's got a great draft podcast and a great product. Daniel Jeremiah, also another guy that was talking about the Allen trade before it happened, or the trade up for Allen. Also super well connected around the league. Both have talked about hearing conversations around the league that the Bills have a lot of interest in Jonah Williams at 9, and then also Dillard and Oliver. So we're hearing Oliver twice. Jonah is a name that's starting to come back around towards the Bills, and then obviously Dillard. So what do you think of these rumors? Are these just people throwing stuff at a wall and hoping that it sticks? Or is this something that is probably circulating around the league as, hey, the Bills are really in on these guys?
I think it's really hard to separate what is a report, what is what they're hearing, what is plants from an agent. But I think there's logic to each of those. I don't think it's that hard to come out right now and say, hey, I'm hearing that it's likely the Bills would love to see Ed Oliver, Andre Dillard, Jonah Williams, or Juwan Taylor. Well, yeah, of course they would. They're 4 of the top 10 players in the draft, and they're very likely options. Yeah, at need positions, and likely to be the best guy available at pick 9. So I don't think that's a huge stretch, and it's hard for me to give full credit with how tight-lipped everything at One Bills Drive is. I don't believe anyone knows what the Bills want to do, and that they have some super secret insight into their preferences. But I do think that they can help intelligently connect dots between visits, team need, talking to agents, talking to contacts there that at least are forthright in sharing, yeah, we do like that guy. And if he's on the board, of course we'd be interested. I do believe they get a comment like that, but with those reports that are out there, if they went through and at pick 9 it was Brian Burns and they passed over 2 or 3 of those guys, I'm not all of a sudden going to be shocked that, sure, oh my gosh, I thought you had contacts and reports that this was the guy. But I think it's very likely that they will end up being proven true in hindsight.
We won't spend too much time talking about this, but one conversation real quick before we get into the mock draft. Jonah Williams is a guy you loved right out of the gates, and I think he's a very conservative pick, but not conservative in a bad way, like, oh, we're just settling here. Conservative in that he is just a really steady technician at a position of need, and he falls right in line of that value of that pick. That's what I mean by conservative. But so say they take him, obviously a lot of people have said move him to guard. I think that's hogwash. I think that's really silly take. He's a left tackle in the NFL. I don't care about his arm size. He's a left tackle in the NFL, especially on the Bills. We got Deion Dawkins sitting here. They take Jonah Williams, the supposed interest. Let's say it's true. What does that mean for Deion Dawkins? Is he getting kicked into guard and kind of using some of the versatility of the free agents that we have to kind of move things around? Does he become a target in a trade potentially? A young offensive lineman? Where's Deion Dawkins fall? I think Jonah Williams gives them a lot of options.
So let's say that we take Jonah Williams and let's include Andre Dillard in that spot. If we take one of those two, prototypical left tackles at number 9, it's because we believe they can play left tackle. I am open to the fact that there are intelligent scouts and writers who think Jonah Williams could be a guard. Anyone who thinks that doesn't think he's a pick at pick 9. They think he's a guy in the 20s. Anyone who thinks that he's a tackle thinks that he's a guy at pick 9. So I've gotten into that debate with a couple people. Those two worlds don't overlap. There are not people who believe Jonah Williams should be a guard and that he should be a pick at pick 9. If they think he's a guard, it means that they don't think he's good enough to be a guy there at 9. So if we take a guy at 9 who all he's done in college is play left tackle or played tackle and mostly left tackle, that means that you want him to start there from day one. I don't think it's crazy that Dawkins could be traded, but I think it's unlikely, especially with the age and the contract length of the other guys that we signed. I also think most fans probably have a misconception about the ease of position switch with flipping from left tackle to right tackle versus left tackle to left guard. I actually think it's much more likely that Deion Dawkins would slide in one spot to left guard than flip over to right tackle. Your stance is the same. Your pass sets and things like that are much more similar. You're not learning a whole different side of your body to do things. And many people thought that he could be a exceptional guard at the pro level when he came out. So I think that is certainly a strong possibility of what's there and probably the most likely in the short term. Now, what that means long term for him, if we would re-sign him, if he would eventually be a trade target, drafting a replacement for a player after 2 years isn't the greatest endorsement of that guy. So you have to take that with a grain of salt. But I don't think that it means that he would immediately be shown the door or that he would immediately leave. My guess is he would slide into left guard and that we would have a starting lineup of either Jonah Williams or Andre Dillard at left tackle, or Deion Dawkins at left guard, Mitch Morris at center, a 3-way competition between Spencer Long, Feliciano, and Quentin Spain at right tackle or right guard, and then a competition between Nsekhe and Waddle at right tackle, likely Nsekhe.
Yeah, no, I don't think Deion Dawkins can play on the right side of the line at all. I don't even think he could be a right guard. He's playing on the left side of the line. I think he would move to left guard if they move him in. I think he'd be a fantastic guard, and a lot of guys have made a really long career out of not totally panning out at tackle, moving into guard and playing really well. That's why a lot of people say when a guy can't play at the NFL level, just move him into guard because so many people have succeeded in doing that. I think it'd be a great move for Deion Dawkins, but we'll see. They might not even go down that road. So let's get into it, man. While you're loading up the draft here and screen sharing that with everybody, Ryan Talbot did report. If you aren't a premium member in the Slack channel, I have the Slack channel up at all times on my phone, buzzing me. Ryan Talbot he tweeted out and our friend Mark Ryan shared it in the Slack channel. The Bills had a private workout with Iowa tight end Noah Fant at the end of March per source. So there you go. We were just talking about the tight ends and visits and not hearing anything about it. Noah Fant did indeed have a private workout with the Bills. So Ryan Talbot, if you're not following him at Ryan Talbot Bills, great follow. Has a ton of these visits. Really, he's one of the spots to go to get the list of all the visits.
Absolutely. He's got the best list that I've seen in aggregating but again, some of it's just weird Instagram stalking. Some of it's reports, but the combination and pulling all that data together, Ryan and the team there at Upstate New York do an awesome job.
Yeah, and Ryan's got great dad jokes. So
yes, and I will say I did accuse him of trying to trick us when he was putting out the list. I thought that he made up the name Hamp Cheevers just to see if we were paying attention, but I have confirmed that actually is a human that exists.
All right, so you got this mock draft. Let's get this going.
We are ready. Let's jump in, and we will put it up on the board here. All right.
Right now, you're just going to be stuck looking at Greg's face. Here we go. No, and then you're looking at mine.
Nice. All right. So again, we are going to pull this up. I use the CBS Sports aggregate because it pulls together multiple boards and I think is the best mix. I've also done a combination where our competitors will pick from multiple other boards, so it's not just picking off of ours. And we'll go through all 7 picks here. So we'll get things jumping right off again. Today we're going to go back and not do trades. We'll do another one where we get a little wacky. I think these are the kind of trades we could see. I can't lie. If the Panthers offered us the 16th pick, their second rounder and third rounder, I would immediately take that. And I think that would be an amazing trade. But just for today, we're going to go with just our core picks so we can kind of stay on task. The first picks coming off the board: Kyler Murray, Quinnen Williams, Nick Bosa, Brian Burns going a little early, Josh Allen, Dwayne Haskins, Ed Oliver, and Noah Fant.
Oh, Fant, Eddie. Wow.
So with
also mad somewhere.
Our core guys that we've looked at, we've got the 4 guys. Matter of fact, 3 of the 4 that were recommended besides Ed Oliver. We have Juwan Taylor, we have Jonah Williams, we have Andre Dillard, and we have Montez Sweat. So we'll give you the dropping the hammer. You get to make the final pick here today. You know my love for both Sweat and Jonah Williams. Juwan Taylor is there. Andre Dillard is there. Where should we lead off in today's mock?
Let's go with Jonah, mostly because I like it. I like offensive tackle, and Eric did a great job. If you haven't seen it yet, head over to the feed at Cover One. Eric did a great job of putting up some stuff about Jonah, and I think he's going to have a really nice piece on Jonah Williams here coming out here shortly.
Absolutely.
So in the Jonah Williams vibe today.
No, I like it. And again, I've been an enormous fan of him all year. I think that if you are the best offensive tackle in the best conference in football, that should matter. And that measurements after the fact shouldn't be the reason that you get crazy or go up and down. He is a great football player, and that I want great football players on this team.
And if your problem with him is his national championship game, come find me on Twitter and we can have a long conversation about that, because I will fight anybody that bases
one snap.
It was more than that.
Bad snap.
The game was not good. He had a bad game. One bad game does not impact a player's draft position, especially with a career of great games. Absolutely. So there were some good moments in that game, but it wasn't just it wasn't one bad thing or that one bad gif. Yeah, he had a tough game against a top-notch edge guy.
Yeah, so 3 other first-round picks.
Yeah, so but I'll fight anybody who wants to talk about that.
All right, so here in the second round, we have a lot of guys we had in for visits. We have N'Keal Harry. We do have Chauncey Gardner-Johnson. We have Rock Ya-Sin. We have another cornerback in Justin Lane. We have receiver that I love, Hakeem Butler, who did not come in on a visit. We have your man, Irv Smith. And someone I've seen a lot of attention and a growing list for is our edge rusher, Chase Winovich. So a lot of really nice options here. I know this is an area of the draft that I love, this kind of 30 to 50 range. I'd love to try to get another pick in this ballpark, but who are you feeling here out of the options we have?
Well, so to the conversation we had earlier, and I don't know if this is just kind of my recency bias, I really like Harry here just because here's the problem with these mock drafts, and you heard me talk about it with Pat the other day, is that we'll pick Harry and then I'll have a ton of wide receiver options in the 4th, 5th round. But what I'm not going to have in the 4th or 5th round is his body type and ability to come in day one and really be an impact player that we don't have. So I do like Harry here.
Okay, I like it. And I think, like you said, there's a reason we've brought in that kind of size in the visits that we've done. I think they realize that, hey, we have a lot of speed. We have some really strong separation skills. We have a lot of guys there that were brought in, with some really strong logic of why we brought them in, but I think we need to be smart about, hey, that's the reason that they're looking at players like this, and that's, I think, for a good reason. And if we have a talent like that at pick 40, I could definitely see that coming in.
Yeah, and it people are chanting for Irv, and I don't know if anybody's heard me on here before. It's really hard for me to not take Irv in every mock draft. I'm really trying hard not to just be a homer that takes him every time he's available. So my first reaction would have been to take him, but I want to try to stay to the exercise that we're doing and not just my fandom.
Again, no, I think that makes sense. I think that here, if we opened up with an offensive tackle and a wide receiver, I really would think, especially Sternberger is off the board. I think if Jay Sternberger was here, maybe he's there. But I think once you get past him, the guys that are there at tight end are all kind of very similar. I really think they would look towards the defensive side of the ball. So, on the defensive line, I know Eric is a huge fan of Charles Omenihu from Texas. He can play both a pass rush and D tackle, and maybe some snaps at defensive end. Joe Jackson is a good talent. Kalen Saunders on the edge. Ja'Kai Polite is someone who at one point was a first round pick for many teams and has fallen. He was similar to our conversation earlier about Greg Little, that I don't love him early on, but here at pick 74, Ja'Kai Polite is a very serious value. Joanne Williams is a corner that we had in. I like Lonnie Johnson a lot for that length, but Joanne Williams is nice value at this kind of level. And Voshawn Joseph is a guy who came in for a visit and that we obviously have some interest in as well. I'm not going to let you take a running back at this spot, but there are nice running backs left there too. So who is someone who interests you here out of, say, Omenihu, Joseph, Joanne Williams, and Ja'Kai Polite?
None at this pick. But if you're saying, hey, let's take defense, another guy I think I'd like to bring up here, if you go back to cornerbacks, is David Long. I think that he fits a lot of what the Bills are looking for at that position as far as the archetypes go. And I also think that he is a guy that can play inside or outside, where if you're going to take a defensive back this early in the draft, I don't think they will. I don't think they're going to go defensive back this early, but if they were, I think that you can look there.
Who else interests you on the offensive side of the ball?
It would be running backs, to be honest. I know you said don't take a running back, but it would be a guy that visited like a Sanders or something like that. Who else is there at guard?
That's what Michael Dieter is probably the highest ranked guy there, although Nate Davis is here.
Nate Davis, I think Samia is. This board is not where I would have him.
It's tough to know who would rank guys in a certain spot.
So let's go back to the line, because we obviously know we need. So let's go with Amia here from Texas, even though I like the idea of waiting on Saunders one more round, but you want defense. I'm a guy that likes to give you what you want.
I like it. And I actually think if Charles Omenihu is there at pick 74, I think he'd be a slam dunk. I think he's a really versatile defender. He had an awesome interview with the Senior Bowl. Anyone who didn't see the clip, Eric actually had a really cool interview with him, and they were kind of able to go into some of the X's and O's there. Kalen Saunders did just go off the board, so smart that we didn't pass on a lineman waiting for him. So we would have lost there. David Long did just go. So another talent off the board. Joanne Williams just went at cornerback as well.
So now we're sitting here, or we're not up yet.
No, coming up soon here at pick 40. Now, I think this is an area we'd start to look into running back and see who's there. So Myles Gaskins is there. Elijah Holyfield, Justice Hill is a guy that I think is interesting.
Here, can you go?
They rank James Williams really low. I know James Williams is a guy that we spent some time on earlier today from Washington State, and they have him really low on their board.
I think a lot of boards will. I don't know that NFL evaluators will also, but I think a lot of the boards for this sake are going to have him low just because not being able to really understand where his production fits at the NFL level.
Sure. At tight end, Foster Moreau, Kahale Warren, Caleb Wilson. At guard, Drew Samia is still there, so that's a definitely an interesting pick. From an edge standpoint, Max Crosby is there. I do love him in the fourth round here. Jalen Jokes, Ben Banagu. Corner probably started to fall off.
I don't want anything there.
Look, it's Hamp Cheevers.
I don't want him. Let's go.
I would say my vote
Crosby.
Samia or Crosby would be the two I'd look at. You like Crosby?
Sure.
All right, and again,
not my favorite directional Michigan.
Another pick coming up here in the fourth round. Maybe one of those guys make it to us still.
Yeah, I think there's going to be interior offensive linemen that we could still grab. Again, if they don't move Dawkins in this scenario, which I think they do, I still think that grabbing an interior guy for the future isn't a terrible idea for them. But I think running back now is really, you got to look at this.
Sure. So again, I think that they're really low on James Williams. Both of us like Divine Ozigbo, Myles Gaskins. Travion Williams, I think, is a lesser version of James Williams. They have him rated much higher, but both are good receiving backs. Bryce Love is an interesting maybe IR stash for the future. I wouldn't do that in the 4th round, but it's definitely some possibility there. Who do you like here?
Yeah, no, I don't like any of these guys right now. Again, yeah, Bryce Love is a guy I'm taking 5th or later to stash him. I don't want him now. So let's see.
You have Kahale Warren, Caleb Wilson at tight end. Again, not a lot at the cornerback area. Blake Cashman there at linebacker, as well as Ben Burkiven. I know a lot of people like him as well.
Let's see what we got here. You bring it up. Did we look at edge already? We already got.
Well, we got Crosby probably, and Amina, who is kind of a tweener guy there. So
safety. Can you pull up safety for me?
Yeah.
Give me Edwards.
Mike Edwards. Yeah,
I love him. Yeah,
that's a great pick here, late 4th. I think, and matter of fact, I think that's a likely pick there in the late 4th. I think some combination of Crosby and Edwards or Kalen Saunders are very common picks of mine in the 4th round there. If we don't edge early,
if I can't find anything in that area, that's why I say, hey, pull up safety, because if he's there, that's what I want. I think to your point of we just went defense 3 in a row. If we're going to take a running back, I think.
Sami is still on the board here. I definitely think one of these 5th round picks should be a running back, and I'd be down to a Ozigbo or James Williams. I would probably lean towards Samia still being on the board. I actually think he's close to the top player on the board left. I think they would absolutely take him.
And another guy here, the reason I would take Samia too is running back. You really have 3 or 4 options when we get back there. I like Higdon out of Michigan as well. A guy that not a lot of people are talking about. That might be the Michigan homer in me. Their offense wasn't very good, but I actually like his style.
Okay. Yeah, let's go Samia and then the best running back left when we get to our second 5th rounder here. We did just lose Myles Gaskins. Oh, and Higdon went as well.
Mother. No, I don't care. That's the thing about these running backs. I don't really care.
Yeah, so I would say Divine Ozigbo or late James Williams, one of those two.
Nah, let's go Zigbo. I like his style. And I think Sean McDermott will make a lot of fans mad when they talk about really grounding and pounding in the cold weather with him. People are
that. I can promise you that will anger a lot of people.
I love it. I can't wait to be on Twitter when that happens.
So we haven't got a linebacker yet. I think that's an important position to look at. And I actually, just to prove a point, and we talked about how crazy the depth is at some of the positions. There are still guys available at some of the spots that I think Zach Gentry and CJ Conrad, Trevon Wesco, there are still tight ends here that once you get past those top 3 guys, I just don't think it's that big of a difference in the developmental guy later on. So I'd be fine with any of those guys to be able to look at as one of our remaining picks. I do think they will pick a linebacker. So I actually like Burkiven. I think he is a legitimate prospect. Khalil Hodge, people know the name from Buffalo. And then I'm always a fan of Sean Takitaki. Is just fun because I want a guy named Sean Takitaki.
Oh, and another guy like that I'm not going to pick here, but is still on the board is Daniel Wise. I think he's got some versatility at the interior defensive line, and he's still there. So if you missed a couple rounds, I'm not saying he's going to be a guy that comes in day one and does a lot, but I think he's a versatile guy that could be fun. At linebacker, I really like Gary Johnson a lot. Okay. I don't know if it's just the name, but if we're forced to take a linebacker, I'm fine with taking Gary Johnson here.
All right, let's go. I do think this is a likely area for linebacker, and that's a name that I haven't taken in many of the mock yet. So let's go ahead and do that.
Perfect. And now we're getting into, and I talk about this a lot on Pat's podcast when we were doing that. When you start getting into these late round picks, we kind of all agree it's not going to be 10 guys. So I'm not going to get hung up on who they take here, because if they are even in some crazy world stuck taking 10 guys, these guys most likely are not going to be roster guys. They're going to be practice squad guys or cut guys, just camp body guys, because they're just not going to be able to afford to bring in 10 other guys unless they really win out spots.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a lot of, practice squad competition, guys that might be able to come in and make an impact, but very likely are going to be fighting for that 53rd spot, or maybe a chance to be able to jump in. There.
Mark Fields is still here. I should
Yeah.
take him. I think that's.
We'll do. I think they would take a corner, so he's a representation of a seventh corner there. And then I do think, again, this is the example. I actually think they brought in Trayvon Wesco for a visit, so I think he'd be a likely pick here. Or do you like Gentry more?
Sure. No, I don't care either.
It's a 7th round pick.
Yeah, I don't care at all. Here's a spot too, and I know we get caught up a little bit on guys that maybe they need to get in position, but I think if they're stuck with some of these extra picks, that you're just kind of taking sometimes guys on waivers of freak athleticism, and even if you have depth at the position, maybe they just had the wrong scheme fit in college or something happened in college, and you say, what, I'm just going to take a chance on this guy, and if he pans out, that's a great problem to have, and if not, then he's just on the practice squad or the street, and we don't care. So I think that there's some of that too if they're stuck with more picks than they want to be.
Sure. So again, to summarize where we came out, assuming they do take all 10 again, we opened up with Jonah Williams at pick 9. In the second round, we went N'Keal Harry, wide receiver from Arizona State. Third round, pick 74, we went Charles Omenihu, the defensive tackle from Texas. Fourth round, Max Crosby, the edge defender from Eastern Michigan. Later fourth round pick, Mike Edwards, the safety from Kentucky. In the fifth round, we got Drew Samia, the guard from Oklahoma. In the later fifth round pick, we got Divine Ozigbo, running back from Nebraska. In the sixth, we got Gary Johnson, linebacker from Texas. Seventh round, cornerback Mark Fields from Clemson. And as our final pick, tight end Trayvon Wesco from West Virginia. I think that was a pretty good haul. What do you think?
It's not my best draft. If you want to see my absolute best draft, you got to head over to the Slack channel and go over to the mock drafts channel, and it'll be sitting there somewhere. No, it's a fine draft. I think I really like what we did at the top. I know you and I have a little bit of a different perspective of if they take offense, if they got to keep taking offense, or they got to go to the defensive side of the ball. I think the defense on this team is so good, and even though there are holes, that I feel pretty confident if the best player available still on the offensive side of the ball. I don't know that they say, hey, you know what, we've gone a little heavy on offense. I think that lining that up to give the best opportunity to Josh Allen is something that I'm for. I don't know if Brandon Beane and McDermott feel that way, but I'm all for it. And I don't think that taking those guys prevents them, but I do think it's good for this type of exercise.
Yeah, and it would be a hypocrite of me to say that they would be rigid like that, to say, oh, we opened up offense, we have to take defense here. They won't. Yeah, I think you're right in that it's not likely that they're going to force their hand one direction or the other, and it might fall that way. We might open up with 3 defensive players. What if we open up with Ed Oliver, Chase Winovich, and Rocky Sin? Yeah, sure. That would be awesome. And it would be really great to add that level of talent, and people would freak out that we didn't add a weapon for Josh Allen or more protection on the offensive line. Sure. No matter what, we only have so many top day 1, day 2 picks. So there's going to be some leap of faith with the guys that are there and just taking the best that we can.
Yeah, and this is the position that they've got us in that we're really excited about, with best player available, and you have to trust some of what they're doing. They're not going to hit on every one of these picks, but you kind of got to have to, I hate to say it, trust the process. So what else we got, man? You got anything else for us? Where can the people find you? We should wrap it up and let people get on with their Friday evenings here.
Absolutely. No, come and find me on Twitter at Greg Thompsett, GregTompsett. Love to follow back Bills fans and have a good time. Always kind of talking through what's going on. Come and find me and we'll have some fun.
Yeah, and you're often in the Slack channel as well.
All the time.
Yeah, and if you don't know about the Slack channel, head over to cover1.net. Join us on our premium subscription. Just $10 gets you premium subscription for the whole year. And one of our favorite parts of the premium subscription, outside of the great content that you get for being a premium subscriber and first look content, is the Slack channel. As you saw me here tonight talk about the Slack channel, I was getting notifications while we were live, people sending in tweets. You really don't miss anything when you're on the Slack channel. I was just talking about with Greg. He likes watching the game from home. And I said, I like going live and when I do think I missed out on something this last year, it was in the Slack channel. I just opened up Slack on my phone and people would say, oh, this guy got hurt, this guy happened. So I never miss anything, and most of it's because the Slack channel is there. And I almost pervert to Twitter these days. So definitely join. $10 right now, get you access for the entire season, so you can't beat that. While you're over at cover1.net, make sure you check out Jordan Reed's draft guide. We talked about it a little bit earlier on. Make sure you go peep that, guys. All the proceeds go back to a charity, so it's not like anybody's making money on this, and he did a ton of work. It's 200 prospects, full page analyst on all these prospects. You can't beat this draft guide. I'm telling you guys, you're going to want to get your hands on it. Ton of content coming out, guys. I'm going to be missing the show this next Wednesday, but Greg's going to hold down the fort with Nate, and the OG Eric is going to be here, and they're going to be doing some archetype draft stuff. So make sure you get on that, because Eric, I think, has a really good way of, like I said earlier, filling out these boards, figuring out by round who is really a Bills archetype player. And he's going to kind of give us some insight on that, and look for those articles to start to drop here soon of him really pinpointing Bills targets that he sees throughout these rounds of guys that just fit the historical needs of the Bills. So make sure you're tuned in to Cover One. And if you want the different articles to come to you on the fly when you need them on notifications, make sure you download our app. You can get the app on the Android store or the iOS store, and you get push notifications anytime we drop an article. So if you want to know when his Jonah Williams archetype article is coming out, and you're sitting at work and you want an excuse to go to the bathroom for 20 minutes, make sure that you download the app, because it'll come to you, and that'll be a good time to go take a bathroom break and get paid to take a poop and read a great article. So make sure you do that. You can follow me at Aaron Quinn 716. I love engaging with fans just like Greg does. So find us there, and we look forward to seeing you guys this Wednesday. And we also got a big show coming up pre-draft, because we go live all the time. We'll be live Wednesday before the draft. That one's sponsored by the Buffalo Sports Card Convention. Make sure that you follow us. We got some giveaways for that, a Trey White autograph photo and a Stevie Johnson autograph photo that will be given away for people that are in the live chat. So make sure you follow us, guys, and make sure you stay tuned in for that one. We're going to have Russell Brown, Cover One draft guy, in for that, and we'll go through a real big mock. So make sure you guys come, stay tuned, and we'll catch you on the next one, guys.